What's going on, everyone, and welcome into Plaisant's podcast. We are doing another draft profile. I'll be flooding your feed with them over the coming weeks. Right now, we're focused on Mansoor, Delane, the LSU corner who transferred in from Virginia Tech year prior to that. Let's talk about what he has in terms of comprehensive game. At LSU, Blake Baker had LSU running a very man-centric, man-heavy style defense in the secondary, and Delane did a phenomenal job at that. I want to talk first about the statistics before I get into the pure strengths. QBR is, a quarterback rating in college football is a very subjective stat. It's not something that I like to base an opinion off of, but when targeted throughout his entire collegiate career, he only allowed a quarterback rating of 56.7. That number plummeted all the way down to 27.5 in 2025 in LSU's defense. Obviously, the man-to-man defense is what he really thrives on. Didn't allow a single touchdown all last season. There were a couple of questions about his game going into last year, but holistically, I think he's one of the best, if not the best corner in this year's draft. Let's first talk about the strengths. And then I'll get into the Virginia Tech stuff. He has great instincts. And I think a lot of that goes back to his Virginia Tech days. If you go and look at current NFL players, there are a ton of Virginia Tech defensive backs that are thriving in the league right now. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but the free safety for the Saints was a great DB for Virginia Tech last season. That being said, Delane thrives on instinctual football. He knows exactly when to jump a route. He plays perfectly to the boundary. Usually when you see a guy, I think he's about 6 foot, 190 pounds, not the biggest guy in the world, kind of a slender frame. When you see guys like that, you think, oh, goodness gracious, they are going to be a disaster on the boundary, specifically with possession catches. I didn't see Delane have a major problem with that at LSU. Now, then again, didn't match up against a ton of huge wide receivers. Did a really good job against Clemson's stacked receiver core. I thought, overall, throughout the entire film that I watched, both at Virginia Tech and LSU, it didn't matter who he really matched up against. He was going to try to clamp up whoever it was. Versus Texas A&M, this was probably the film that I watched the closest. He did get injured in that game partly, but played almost the entire game. Only allowed 2 receptions all game long, and that's a game that Texas A&M absolutely torched LSU. So, like I said, no touchdowns allowed last season. Let's continue with the strength. He uses his body, and this goes back to the instincts. He uses his body as a tertiary defender. Of course, you've got your arms. That's your first 2. You can use your head a little bit, but he uses his chest to break up passes, which is not something you see, once again, from corners his size. There's a ton of in-breaking routes where he steps to the defender an extra step rather than reaching in with his hand. He hits them square with his chest, and it ends up getting him a couple extra passes defended. That's what you really want to see from a quote-unquote smaller defensive back. He utilizes everything in his arsenal to make sure that he defends the pass, and he does it at such an elite level. What really stands out and what allows him to do all this is he's extremely fluid on the field, both with his body and his stylistic play. Let's talk about his body first. His hips are unbelievably connected to the way that he shifts from short to intermediate to deep routes. Now, we're going to talk about the deep balls in just a minute, but press man, zone coverage, match coverage, it does not matter. He gets after the football, whether or not he's being asked to guard a 5-yard slant, a 10-yard out, a 15-yard comeback. He instinctually uses his feet that translate immediately up to his hips. I'm not doing a good job of visualizing this for you guys, but I don't really know how to describe it. Like, it's like his whole body is one unit. It's not a bunch of different moving parts. It's kind of like a car, right? You watch the motor move, but you realize the motor, the tires, the battery, the wheel, all this other stuff is moving in conjunction with each other to make a car go forward or turn. And that's exactly what his body's like. He moves as a holistic unit, and it's so smooth to watch on the field. Once he gets attached at the hip to a receiver, he stays glued to them. This is what you really want to see. Now, last thing I want to talk about with the instincts, I don't think he's much of a run stopper, but he showed some bright spots blitzing, which you don't see a lot from a corner. Like, you don't describe most corners as elite blitzers. I thought he was able to get to the quarterback at a high level, and even when he didn't, like that game versus Texas A&M, he sticks his hands up that in a tight game. I think the score was 18-14 at the time. Sticks his hands up, deflects the pass. It ends up being a Harold Perkins interception. Those are the type of plays that you want to see your corner make, even when he's not, guarding the number one wide receiver. You want to see him engaged on the field, doing a variety of different things. Delane does that better than anybody else in this class, besides maybe Jermod McCoy from Tennessee. That being said, there are a few weaknesses or concerns that I have about his game. Let's hop into that. So on all the film, I saw he defended the deep ball fairly well, but there were several balls where they ended up being incompletions because it's college football, and you don't go up against the elite quarterbacks every single game. A lot of these balls ended up getting thrown short, but his head never turned around. In a lot of different cases, that's going to end up being a pass interference call, but more often than not, it's just going to end up being, at least a contested catch, because he doesn't have the frame, and this is the next thing that I'm going to get into. He doesn't have the frame to match up against the biggest guys. What I'm concerned about is him matching up against A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, Nico Collins. Now, of course, a good defensive coordinator, knowing that these could be potential limitations, would never put him in that situation, but you never know these days. I mean, Derek Stingley's not the biggest guy in the world, but he matches up against the best receivers in the game, no matter what size they are, and he plays extremely well when doing it. Delane can absolutely be that guy. He doesn't show, now this correlates back to the deep ball, does not show top end speed. He's definitely not a burner. He matches up well, unbelievably well in those short to intermediate routes because his lateral quickness is just that good. But in terms of having like a Tyreek Hill matchup against him, he might get burnt on a few of those balls down the field if he's 5 yards or less away from the receiver he's guarding. That would be a slight concern for me. We're going to see his 40-yard dash later this week at the Combine. I'm curious to see what that number is, but in terms of actual play, we'll have to wait and see on that. Not much. Last concern is he's not much of a run stopper. You don't really ask your corner to stop the run that much, but he has some shorter arms. What it looks like on film. I haven't seen the official measurements. Looks like he's got short arms. Tight ends and offensive linemen obviously are always going to have longer arms than him, but they really get up into this box. They pack a punch and they completely blow him off of his run fit. It is definitely a problem that he's going to have to do a better job of, whether that means being, more agile and aware of where blockers are coming on a power run play. Specifically, I remember the Alabama game this past year. There were just a ton of plays where maybe it wasn't the Alabama game, but I digress. There was just a ton of plays where these athletic offensive linemen and tight ends were getting outside and just immediately getting into his frame and blowing him off the spot. You expect that from corners, but that is definitely something that needs to be improved. Holistically, though, like I said, the positives far outweigh the negatives. I'm talking about some like nitty gritty stuff, especially the deep ball and whatnot. It's not that it was like a very consistent problem. It's just something that I noticed over time, especially in the man-to-man stuff at LSU. When he was at Virginia Tech, you didn't see a lot of it because he wasn't being asked to be put in that situation. And quite frankly, with how much the NFL runs cover 2 zone with 2 safeties on the back end, you're not going to see it a lot from him in the first place. Usually have safety help over the top, especially when you're going up against a burner. So it's not like he's going to be asked to cover the deep ball a ton. So situationally, I think he meets the criteria of being the best corner in this draft. It's definitely an argument between him and McCoy. My player comp for him is Trent McDuffie from Kansas City. Once again, you look at his draft profile going into his draft, and you kind of saw the same concerns. Not as big of a frame as you'd like, kind of a matchup nightmare against big, long, tall, physical receivers. But McDuffie has absolutely done way more than just hold his own. He is one of the best corners in the AFC. I give Delane a solid 7.3 out of 10. I think this is a Pro Bowl caliber corner. Obviously, that's what you expect out of a first-round pick, but let's be honest. I think more than half of first-round picks never see the Pro Bowl. It's rare to have that in a first-round draft pick on a consistent level. But with Delane, I think given the diversity history that he's got, he can absolutely go out there and play zone, man-to-man. That's what's going to allow him to see the field the most. And everybody knows the best way to get more time on the field is by getting time on the field to begin with. And if he can show that he has a diverse portfolio of things that he can do well, which I definitely think he does, he's absolutely going to be able to see the field come practice time. All he has to do is perform there as a first-round pick, and he'll be in the starting lineup come his rookie season. I think he could absolutely be in the conversation for defensive player or defensive rookie of the year. You know, will we ever see him transcend to the Revis Island conversations or like one of the greatest corners in NFL history? I doubt it, but I mean, that's not that stretchy of a take, right? I mean, it would be insane for me to get on here and say, this is the best corner that I've ever seen play the game of football, right? I think Delane is just a very good prospect with a ton of history here to back up all of the positives to his game. The negatives are, quite frankly, situational stuff that I think DCs will be able to play around. So that being said, that's my draft portfolio on him. Let me know what you think in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe. I got a ton of more of these coming out. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you next time.